Hello everyone and welcome. I'm DJ Vicious. In this video, we're going to talk about whitelisting your Firestorm viewer, what it is, why it's important, and how to do it. We'll then cover graphic settings in the new viewer that you may find helpful to improve your performance and your experience using the new PBR-enabled viewer. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce a couple of friends I brought along to help us today. To my right, your left, is Spike. To my left, your right, is Smiley. Some of you may have been considering going back to your previous version of Firestorm. I can hear your nods. But before you do, watch this video to the end as these steps in many cases solve the issues that many of you ask about or have heard about. In addition, even for the more robust user of Firestorm, you may find some useful and helpful information. Please note that Firestorm uses a 3-version rule. This means that at any time, there are 3 active versions that work: the current version and the 2 before it. At some point, you will need these steps going forward. The sooner you become more familiar with these steps, the faster you can get back to what you truly enjoy about being on the grid. As many of you have discovered or heard, Firestorm has released a newer version, Firestorm version 7.1.9.74745. This new version has brought us PBR, physically based rendering. PBR has been a game changer in how we see things on the grid. It's important to note that PBR is not something exclusive to Firestorm. In fact, Linden Labs released PBR onto the grid in November of 2023 and subsequently into the official SL viewer. Now on to whitelisting. What is it? In short, whitelisting is the process of telling your antivirus that a program is safe. Adding a program to the whitelist of your antivirus is also called an exclusion. If you find yourself asking, isn't my Firestorm viewer safe? Not to worry, it is. The reason we have to whitelist Firestorm is because Firestorm does not have a digital certificate. A digital certificate essentially tells Windows and your antivirus that a program is safe and meets specific standards required by the certificate. If you're now wondering why Firestorm does not have this certificate, simple. Digital certificates are expensive. We must not forget that the entire Firestorm team, from the developers who code it to the staff that we come to rely on in support chat, are all volunteers and do not get paid nor generate any revenue for their work. It's important to whitelist your viewer each time you install a new update. With each new version, not only does the version number change, but do many of the files that make it work. Windows, and specifically your antivirus, treats this as something it has never seen before, and many antivirus programs are actively scanning your PC for changes to files and directories. What happens if you don't whitelist, you may wonder? Not whitelisting the viewer has been linked to, but not limited to, login issues, slow resing, blank or gray textures on objects, orange cloud avatars, and other performance issues. While there are other things that can cause these issues, viewers that are not whitelisted are a common reason. Here's an important note. You may have heard or know someone who says, I've never whitelisted and I've never had any problems. This may be true. Even for those who have really strong and capable PCs, they are working them harder than they need to because their antivirus is scanning the changes in the files all the time. So in short, no matter if you have an older PC, a newer PC, or anything in between, whitelisting your Firestorm viewer is an important first step to getting the most out of the viewer and not work your PC any harder than it has to. Now, I must be fair and say that whitelisting may not solve every issue you are experiencing. Some of the issues may be related to graphics settings, which we will cover later in this video. With that said, please do not skip to the graphics setting portion of this video. In the event that you still need some assistance from the dedicated support staff, they are going to ask if you have whitelisted the viewer and instruct that you do, as not doing so can often cause and does make troubleshooting more difficult. Now on to how do we whitelist. There are 3 important things in Windows we must do before we whitelist the viewer. First, be sure that the viewer is closed. Second, we want to be sure that your antivirus can see all of the directories that we need. And third, you will want to remove any previous exclusions in your antivirus from previous Firestorm versions. Please keep in mind that you can pause this video at any time to follow along with the steps as we cover them. Before we begin, the information that we'll be talking about in this section can be found at the website at the bottom of this video. If you need a clickable link, please ask out in the Firestorm support chat and anyone will be happy to provide you with a link to go directly to that website. As we discussed, one of the first things you want to do is you want to make sure that your viewer is closed during the whitelisting process. Since I've already whitelisted, I'm going to keep my viewer open. The second thing we want to do is we want to make sure that Windows and your antivirus program has access to the directories that we need. By default, some directories are hidden, so we must show them so that we can find them later. As you can see, I've clicked into my Windows search bar down here. Some of you may not have the search bar or search window in your taskbar. You can click on your start button and go from there. In this case, I'm going to use my search bar in the task. What we're looking for is File, Explorer, Options. All right, and you can see that opens File Explorer Options. I'm going to bring this into focus so everyone can see it. When we open this window, we notice that we have 3 tabs across the top here. We're looking for the View tab. Coming down, you can see under Hidden Files and Folders, there are 2 options. Here, usually by default, the Don't Show Hidden Files option is selected. We'll want to make sure that we click the radio button to show hidden files, folders, and drives. We'll then want to make sure that we click Apply. Just clicking OK will not save these changes and make the process difficult, and we'll add a few steps later. So we'll want to make sure that we click Apply and then OK. As we also talked about, you'll also want to remove any previous exclusions in your antivirus. Since we're going there anyway, we'll cover that in just a few moments. Looking at our website, I would like to pull that up for you. This is the website that's shown at the bottom of this video. And let me move that out of the way so that we can see this more clearly. Here is the list of things that need to be whitelisted. Now, don't let the long list of things scare you. It's not scary at all. It's only 4 files, and depending upon your setup, either 2 folders or 3 folders, and we'll talk about that. If we scroll to the bottom, you see that there's a list of antivirus providers here. Clicking on either one of these will either provide you with instructions on how to whitelist in that specific antivirus program, or it will give you a link to click onto that will take you to that antivirus website, and there you will find your instructions. Now, for those of you saying, well, DJ, I have Windows and I don't have antivirus. If you have Windows 10 or Windows 11, you absolutely have antivirus. It's called Windows Virus and Threat Protection. And you can find that here once again coming to your search bar. You can just simply type in virus and threat protection, and that will open up your Windows Virus and Threat Protection window. If you're unsure which antivirus you have, this can be a great window for you to look at as well, as it can show you exactly who the antivirus software is that you currently have installed and what's active. If it's just Windows Virus and Threat Protection, you won't see any other vendor listed here. Now, if we come back up, we look at that there are 4 files. What are they? Well, first is the Firestorm Release 64 exe file. That's the main executable. Here it shows us if you have a 64-bit window version of Windows where you can find it, a 32-bit, and a 32 on a 64 where you might look to find that. Now it's important to know that the current PBR release is a 64-bit viewer. When Firestorm releases 2 more versions, it will only be 64-bit moving forward. The other files that we need to find are the SL plugin exe, the SL voice exe, the Dullin host exe, and the 2 folders, the first 2. This is going to be the cache folder, and here it shows us where to find it. Okay, 64-bit and 32-bit version of Windows again. The settings folder, and again, where to find it. Okay, on a Windows 64, on a Windows 32, and not forgetting my Mac users out there, and Linux users out there, there is directions for where you can find these directories in Mac and Linux, and also Mac and Linux once again for the settings folder. Now let's talk about this third folder. We often see that many of our wonderful moderators talk about 4 files in 3 folders. And they want to point that out because it's easy to forget sometimes that maybe you have a third directory. Why would you? Well, if you're one of those folks that likes to move your chat transcripts logs to a different place, okay, this is going to leave you with a third directory that you will need to find. For some users, the chat transcripts folder, as it clearly states here, is in its default location. This is the same location as the settings folder, which we are already going to whitelist here. So again, I must stress, if you have moved your chat transcripts folder, you will then need to whitelist wherever you put that folder. If you're asking chat transcripts folder, it's probably in the default location. So how do we find this? Let's proceed. First, as we talked about, if you've already whitelisted before, you're going to want to make sure that you do remove your previous exclusions. Prudence says that if you've whitelisted before, you'll want to go into your antivirus application and you'll want to remove all of those exclusions. You would then reboot your PC, then open your antivirus program again, add your exclusions, apply or save whatever applies, and then reboot your PC once more. Again, prudence dictates that is the proper order. Do many people do that? No, but probably should. So let's give you a basic walkthrough of what whitelisting might look like. For me, I happen to be one of those Norton users. So let's show you what that would look like. Now, while each antivirus program is going to look a little different, the process is going to be very, very similar, okay, in each of the applications, be it McAfee, AVG, whatever the case may be. So as we talked about, we're creating exclusions. So you can see here I have items to exclude from scans. Because again, whitelisting is creating an exclusion. It's telling the antivirus, hi, I trust this program, I trust these processes, I trust these directories. Please don't scan them constantly, which leads to, as we talked about before, a number of different issues as well as performance. So as you can see here, as outlined, you can see that I have my directories and my files. There's my release 64exe, plugin, SL plugin, SL voice, Dullin host, and both settings and cache folders. What might this look like? Well, let's show you what this looks like in a Windows. So first I would add my files. Now this brings up a standard file explorer window here in Windows. I come down to C Windows, right? And I go ahead and click on Program Files. Here I have my Firestorm Release 64. I scroll down, there's my Firestorm Release 64 exe. I keep going down, there's my SL plugin. There's my SL voice. If I come back up a little bit, I see that I have the LL plugin folder. If I expand this, there's that Dullin host exe that we also need. Now it's important to note that you can only click and add each one of these files one by one. You cannot select multiples and select them all at one time. So you will have to go through this process several times until you have all 4 folders. Or excuse me, files. Thank you. Now, what about the folders? Well, this ties into that step we did before. So if we come in, once again, we're going to see Windows. This time, we're going to go to Users, your primary user name. We're going to go to the App Data folder. And here, we're looking for 2 directories, local, right, as it shows over here, App Data, local, Firestorm. So we're going to come into local, and we're looking for Firestorm 64. There it is. We would then click it, we'd click OK, and we'd move on. What about the other directory? Same thing. We'll come back into C, we come back into users, your primary user. We go into app data. Now keep in mind, this is the folder that we wanted to make sure that we could see. That's why we were showing hidden files. Otherwise, we wouldn't see this. Okay. So as I come back in, I'm going into app data. This time I'm going into roaming. Okay. Roaming and Firestorm. I then click OK, and I would move on. Now, again, as I noted before, each antivirus program is going to look a little different, but the process is going to be very similar. There's going to be an OK or an add. Windows directories, they're going to be where they are. Your 4 files are going to be program files, Firestorm, as we shown. The directories are going to be in app data. and they're all going to have an OK or add button. Once we're done, your program may have, such as down here, an apply button or save button. Whichever the case may be, make sure that you do that. Otherwise, all this work is for nothing and we haven't effectively whitelisted. Once we've clicked save or apply, then we can go ahead and close out of all these windows we have open. At this time, you want to go ahead and restart your computer. Now that we've discussed whitelisting, what it is, why it's important, and how to do it, now we've come to a more fun segment. Now we come into graphics settings. Now this one has been a subject for sure. As we know, with this new release, it is now PBR enabled. And once again, PBR is physically based rendering. PBR is important to understand because PBR uses more of your GPU. That's basically your graphic processing unit, or the processor that's on your video card. Now, as it's designed to use more of it, it means that it's going to use a few more resources. Now, different folks are going to have a different experience with this. Not all computers are created equally. Not all have all the same settings, same hardware, same capability. What can we do? Well, we can make a few changes and adjustments. Now, one of the things that we notice with this release is that there's no option to toggle on or off ALM. What was ALM, you ask? Advanced Lighting Model. This provides us with some additional graphic capability in terms of what we see and how we see it. With PBR, all of that is incorporated. You're saying, well, where's the toggle on-off switch for the PBR? The short answer, there isn't one. Having said all of that, don't have any fear. There are some settings that we can adjust that will make a difference, okay? And like anything else, we have to be willing to play with a couple of things to find the right settings that work for us, that work for our machine. Let's begin. As many of you know, you'll come into Avatar and you will go ahead and come into Preferences. And if not already, you'll want to click on your Graphics tab. This is a primary focus of where we're going to be and the adjustments that we're going to make that's going to help improve your performance. Now, we talked about whitelisting and what that can do and how that can help your performance. Now, after that, now it boils down to the capabilities of your computer. And what adjustments do we have to make? Just like the previous versions, sometimes you had to make some adjustments in order to get things to look either the way you were wanting them to look or getting them to work adequately with the specifications of your computer, basically the processor you have, the RAM you have, and the graphics capability that you have. First thing I want to point out is that it's real easy to go ahead and grab the quality slider here and just give that an old tug to the left. I would want to say use caution with this. As you start to bring that slider down, it starts to turn off other things that maybe you don't need to turn off. So as we go through this, we're going to be looking to make other adjustments, okay, so that you can maintain the best quality and get some performance back into your viewer. Maybe in some cases it'll be more performance than you had before. Maybe in some cases it'll be performance back to what you're used to. But let's wait before we just grab the old quality slider and bring that back again. One of the first things that has a lot of folks excited about PBR is mirrors. Yes, we have mirrors. Now, here's an important thing we can do. As you can see here, I have mirrors on. One of the things that you can do is turn that off, okay? And the reason why we point turning this out off is that you don't always need that running. If you go to a busier environment, if maybe you should find yourself over at the SLB 21 Shop and Hop and enjoying all the sights and the things that are over there, those are very busy regions. So having mirrors on is working your graphics card a little bit harder than it needs to for no reason, especially if there's no items over there that would benefit from having mirrors turned on. Okay, if you found yourself at home and you haven't bought a mirror yet or any other PBR-based materials and things like that, turning mirrors off will give you an uptick in performance. What's some other things that we can do? Okay, and I can't stress enough that this is going to be a little bit of trial and error. I know that sometimes that's not exactly what everybody wants to hear, but it is um, going to be a bit of trial and error to find the right settings that are going to work for you. You may find that turning one thing off is not the right answer, but turning something else down or turning that off is a better answer. So in this segment, again, we're going to cover some of these things that you can adjust. You may only need to adjust one thing or turn one thing off. You may need to adjust a series of things or turn a series of things off. And we're going to discuss those. So mirrors is a good one that you can start with. Okay, and what I would do is I wouldn't just turn off a whole bunch of things at once. You're going to see this video, you're going to have the option to pause this video and say, okay, what did he say to turn off? Important thing here is do them one by one. See how it impacts you. All right, turn off the mirrors, play with it, see how it works. Did that improve? Do I like it? Great. Okay, that was an improvement, but it's not everything I'm looking for. Okay, then go on to the next step and the next step, the next step until you find the right balance for you that works for you, that either you can live with or works well for the hardware you have. What else can we do? Well, first, we can adjust our draw distance. Now, this is an important one. Some folks, they understand draw distance, and other folks sometimes are a bit cloudy about their understanding about draw distance. As you can see there, I currently have mine set to 256 meters. What does that mean? That means that I'm loading into memory, into the computer's memory, 256 meters away from me, all the objects and everything that's out there, whether I'm looking at it or not, whether I can see it or can't. So in many cases, bringing your draw distance down, okay, to something more respectable like 64 or even 32 can do a world of good for your performance in terms of laggy performance, jittering, and other things of that nature. And a lot of folks focus very heavily on FPS or frames per second. And that's that little indicator up here. And we're going to talk about that because I think there's some misconceptions about that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in this video. But bringing down your draw distance is a great way to also help improve your performance because let's be honest, as I kind of want to give you an example, if you look in behind me, way back in this area over there, that's approximately probably about 30 meters-ish. Now, for most people, do you really need to see past that? I mean, if that's your line of sight, do you ask yourself this, do I really need to see what's going on way over there? Even though I'm not there, I'm not looking at it? Because having a high draw distance is going to impact your performance greatly. And the higher you go on the performance, the more it's going to the higher you, I should, sorry, strike that. The higher that you go on the draw distance, the more it's going to tax your computer, or the harder it's going to work it. Now, I'm not a fan in any case of working a computer any harder than it needs to. So I keep mine at 256 based upon my computer specification, basically what graphic card I have, the processor, and so on. So I keep mine at 256. I do bring it down lower on occasion, especially even though I've got a really robust system, not the absolute blue sky best of best, but a very robust system. Even with that, I still bring my settings down if I'm in busier areas just to pick up some performance. What else can we do? Well, here, if we come over here, we can turn off shadows. And for many people, this has been a game changer. Turning off shadows. Again, we're getting a little closer into that realm of the old ALM or advanced lighting model. Okay. Here, we can come through these settings. And again, I can't stress enough, change them or turn them off one by one. Don't just go through and turn off a whole bunch because at the end of the day, you want to see what these changes do. You want to see how they affect you, okay? And whether that is something that you want to leave off or you might want to, save on something else to get something else. So it's important not to go through and just turn everything off. Because at the end of the day, you could be cheating yourself. You could be robbing yourself of a better visual experience just by going through and turning everything off. So you'll definitely want to turn these off one by one, see how they impact you. So again, we've covered mirrors, we've covered draw distance, and we've covered shadows. And as far as the rest of the items here, the reflection detail, reflection coverage, point lighting, mirror resolution, and all these things, again, you're going to want to play with these one by one. I know it seems like a tedious task, but it's an important task, something that you can absolutely do that will help on your performance. Some people, we've probably seen the chats. We've seen we're saying, well, I was getting 60 frames, 90 frames per second, 100 frames per second. Now I'm down to 15. Well, in some of the things that we've covered throughout this video, either through whitelisting or some of these settings, is oftentimes the cause. What else can we do? Well, we can come to rendering, and this is a good one too. And now we're going to talk about the frames per second here for just a moment. Here's one of the things you can do. You can limit your frame rate. Now, I know there's a lot of conversation about frame rate. There's this old wisdom that says, wow, if I can get 200 frames per second, I'm rocking, I'm great, I'm doing good. This is not always the case. Here's why. There's some good conversation out there that suggests, and I'm not going to tell you what end of the spectrum I'm on this one, but I will say that there is good conversation out there that suggests that anything above either 60 or 90 frames per second basically becomes bragging rights or a waste. Because ideally, the viewer will run quite well, and so will your computer at 60 or 90 frames per second. Let me give you an example. Right now, if I were to go ahead and turn off limit frame rate on my system, I'm not going to do that now, if you're wondering why, because I'm recording this video. But if I were to turn off limit frame rate right now, my frame rate where I'm standing right now would easily jump to 150, maybe even beyond. Here's the thing. Can my computer handle it? Absolutely. However, that increases my GPU performance or usage. So my GPU usage might spike to 90 something percent, 90, 95%, which will then increase the temperature. And some of you may have seen that out in the chat where folks are talking about my fans screaming, my fans are really fast. Well, it's because the GPU usage is really high. All right, because again, PBR is going to use more of your video card. So if I were to turn that off, again, 150 or better frames per second, my GPU usage spikes into the 90 percentile range, my temperature goes up, my fans start running. Now, when I set my frame rate down to where it is now, my GPU usage runs anywhere between 35 and 40%. Big difference. Do I have any glitches? No. Is everything smooth in my movement? Absolutely. So as you can see now, for those of you who are going, well, I wonder what he's running now, let me see. You can see that the viewer is currently running at about 56 frames per second. Okay, because of the things that I've got going on in this area and the things that are going on around me. And again, I have my draw distance set at 256. So with that in mind, my experience is smooth. I'm not working my computer any harder than I have to. I've taken away a lot of performance issues. My fans don't sound like a jet ready to take off at your local airport. So these are some of the things that we can do that will absolutely help. Now, let's talk about a couple of other things. All right, and I think this is slightly misunderstood too. Some people will say, well, if you've got an NVIDIA card, let's go ahead and enable VSync. Okay, let's talk about what VSync is. VSync essentially, in the simplest terms, is going to tell the viewer to align the refresh rate to that of your, and where it works in conjunction with your video card and your monitor, if your monitor is VSync capable. Basically what that does is it makes sure that the viewer and the video card aren't using a refresh rate that's faster than your screen can handle. So in many cases, if you're using a refresh rate or a frame rate that far exceeds what your monitor can handle, you oftentimes run into something that's called tearing, okay, where the graphics, you move and they don't quite look right. They look, discombobulated. They don't quite look clean. Things aren't well put together. There's a number of different things can happen, but that in the simplest context is what VSync does. However, that being said, VSync for NVIDIA cards and capable monitors can be a useful tool. If you're unsure about whether your hardware does that, go ahead and go to Google your video card, look up the specifications, and do the same thing with your monitor to find out if the two are compatible and VSync is the right option for you. Okay, now let's talk about something else that folks have brought into focus that's been a thing recently. Keep in mind that the new PBR version of the viewer, okay, has a new cache file. So for some people, coming in and clearing out your cache, right, which then you would clear your cache and then you would restart Firestorm and log back in. For some people, they've reported this has been a game changer. I can see where there's logic to that. I can say that it may not fix every issue in every circumstance, but I can say for a few seconds of your time, it is a healthy try and go for it. So once again, we've covered some different things here that you can do. Now, last resort option, we can come back to the quality slider and we can bring that down. But again, for me, this would be a last resort. I try to keep my opinion out of these instructionals because I want to make sure that people get the right information and useful information. But this is probably one of those opinionated things, and I apologize, but I'll say that this would be a last resort to give a tug on this. Try pulling out some of these other options to find out if they're right for you. Mirrors, bring down the draw distance, okay? Limit your frame rate, okay? Pulling out the shadows, finding out that you need to pull out some reflection, right? Other things you can do, I mean, a lot of people will play with complexity, they'll reduce that, but honestly, I feel if you make some other adjustments here, you don't have to give up that level of detail. And that's what I stress very heavily in going through this, that bringing down the draw distance, limiting the frame rate, I hate to sound like a broken record, but going through the mirrors, turn off the transparent water, turn off the shadows, okay? You might be able to keep some of the other detail that you like. Again, there's no one size fits all here. There's no easy button. Two identical computers can have two very different experiences based upon how someone might have their computer set, other software they have, what's running in the background. All of these things play a factor. And before I forget, I do want to talk about one other setting. All right. And this one you must be careful with. For some folks, they've had good experiences in checking the override VRAM detection. What does this do? When you set this, you can basically tell the viewer how much of the RAM that is dedicated on your video card. So let's work with simple numbers. If you had a video card that had 12 gigabytes of RAM, its own RAM, all right, and dedicated video cards have their own RAM. So if you had one that had 12 gigabytes, say, most people have found it effective to come in and say, okay, well, I've got 12 gigabytes of RAM, and you will get a warning here, okay, that it could cause instability. So you do need to be careful. But some people have found that coming in saying, well, I've got 12 gigabytes, let me set that to 2/3 value, 2/3 of the available. Okay, so that means you're telling the viewer, hey, I know I have 12, please only use 8. How does this help? Well, for some folks who might like to run multiple instances of Firestorm, for folks who might be running a video editing program or Photoshop or their other favorite image editing program, the DJs on the grid who might be running, you know, Sam, Virtual DJ, Serato, this can be a helpful tool so that your video card still has some resources left over. Okay, there's a number of different explanations for the setting, but think it in terms of that you can limit that to leave some room available to other applications on your computer that you might want to use at the same time, or again, um, running multiple instances. Okay. Now, even for folks who don't do all of that, if you're saying to yourself, well, DJ, I don't do all that. I just come on the grid and I hang out and I do this. This can still be a very useful setting. But before, I can't stress this enough, before you use this setting, please, please, please be careful and look at your video card. Know how much RAM it has before you start playing with the setting and start figuring out how much you want to change it, because you don't accidentally want to set it over what you have. You don't want to set it too little. You want to make sure that you know. How do you find out? You're saying, well, that sounds great, DJ, but how the heck do I know? I mean, I'm not a computer person. How do I know? Well, the good folks at Firestorm have given us a way that we can find out. We can come up to help about Firestorm. Now, if you notice here, we come down. Okay, now you guys get to get a peek under my hood. Okay, see what's powering that ultra setting that some of you are going, yeah, nice machine guy. Anyway, you can come in here and you can see exactly what type of graphic card you have. All right, so here you'll come in, you can see graphics card vendor, NVIDIA, and graphics card memory. So obviously 10,053 megabytes equates to 10 gigabytes of dedicated RAM. All right. And in my case, I don't have VRAM on, as you good folks have seen. I don't have that on. I'm perfectly okay with the way that it runs as it is. All right. On that RTX 3080 there. Now, Folks often say, well, it must be nice. You've got an RTX series, I mean, you blue skied, you've got a lot. Keep in mind the viewer can run on just about any machine. The question is, how well does it run and how well do you want it to run? All right. So this is why we're going to make a few adjustments and why we've discussed a few adjustments that you can make to your graphic settings that can help tremendously. As I've stressed before, in your previous version, you may have had to adjust some settings to get it just right for you. Here is not going to be any different. Now, there is something of a controversial setting that I do want to talk about in here, and you'll hear a lot of folks talking about it, which is exposure. There's a number of people that they've upgraded to the new viewer and they say, wow, everything looks bright and everything looks this. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, keep in mind that when you first log into this new viewer, you're kind of seeing the world through different eyes. And doing so, you're looking at a bunch of textures on a lot of different things, be it your clothes, your skin, your furniture, places that you go to. You're looking at things that weren't designed for PBR, and this would include the environment, your lighting settings. All of those EEPs, what we used to call win lights, have been EEP for some time, but all of those EEPs and all the textures weren't designed with PBR in mind. They were designed for the older lighting system. So a lot of folks have come in and they say, "Oh, well, I found if I reduce the exposure to the minimum setting, which in this case is 0.5, things look better." There's a cautionary tale here. While that might look better right now, what's going to happen is when you finally go somewhere that is using an EEP, basically an environment lighting, which is every region you go to has some type of lighting. When you finally go to a region that's using a proper PBR for their EEP, and it's a dark setting to begin with, it's going to be even darker. So the exposure setting is not something really, it should not be your first go-to. Don't go to that first and make that your priority because it will come to haunt you a little bit later, shall we say. Now, what can we do? All right. Now, I want to show something, and I hope it turns out in this video very well. Good folks at Firestorm have given us another option here. All right. Now, you can see under environment, we now have midday and midday legacy. Now, currently, midday is the new world, right? This is PBR. This is the new world. Now, what you may do, if you don't like your current setting, for those of you that find yourself using midday, maybe you're working on projects, so forth, what you can do is you can switch to midday legacy. And I hope the change here is seen as well in the video as I often see it on my side. Now we're on midday legacy. Now, for me, what I look at is I see things as I did before the new PBR viewer, but I notice a distinct difference. Some things seem a little more washed out, but this is the old lighting model. So if I switch back to environment and I go back to midday, okay, I'm now on my side, and I hope that it purveys into the video. What do I see? I see more vibrant color, more rich color. So again, the exposure setting, that's not something that should be your first go-to. I know that a lot of folks are doing it. They're saying, wow, I need to get rid of the shyness. Sometimes, because of the new lighting model and the new environment lighting that we have now, sometimes it could be as simple as for your skin or your head, going into the HUD and disabling any shine or glossiness effect there. You may find a lot of joy in doing that before playing with your exposure setting because, again, when you go somewhere else that has a true PBR environment and it's dark in nature, it's going to be extremely dark. So I hope I went through enough things here, and I hope you folks have enjoyed this presentation as much as I've made it. I may not have covered everything, but I do hope that I've given everyone enough broad strokes to kind of get started and understand that, hey, this is the grid. We do have to tinker a little bit. We do have to adjust a little bit, and eventually we find just the right thing that's just right for us. Boys and girls, I'm DJ Vicious. Again, it's been a pleasure. Y'all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing y'all out there in the chat.